Hello and welcome to this week's auction update. Over 3,000 auctions over the weekend. CoreLogic telling us one of the busiest weekends in just over a year, in fact. Tim Lawless from CoreLogic back with me with all the details and the top sales around the cap cities in just one moment.
Hi everyone, my name's Nick and I'm the Country Manager here at Beepo. We offer outsourcing services for real estate agencies that are looking to become significantly more productive and efficient. Let me give you a bit of a rundown about how our real estate team actually works. At Beepo, we have many positions to assist our clients in the real estate industry. These include sales assistants, trust account and marketing staff. We also have a couple of our most popular products, the property management assistants and Rock End property assistants.
Welcome back. We're joined this week by Tim Lawless from CoreLogic. Honoured to have you here. Tim, how are you, my friend?
G'day, Kevin. It's been a little while, but good to be back on the show.
Nice to see you, mate. Thank you. Okay, a big weekend, 3,000 auctions, and a pretty respectable weighted average too, Tim.
Yeah, this was going to be the big test for the housing market. We haven't seen the market really being tested on depth up until now. This nearly 3,060 auctions. This was the biggest auction weekend we've seen since March 2018. In fact, in Melbourne, it was the biggest since late 2017. So on those very large numbers of auctions, it could have been the case that we saw clearance rates starting to fade away. But that didn't happen. We saw Sydney holding up above 80% on the preliminary rates, Melbourne in the 70s as well. So still a very strong results. The combined capital city average was 78.9%. So considering the number of auctions, I think that's a very strong result.
Yeah, even out of some of the regional smaller cap cities too. You know, if you're looking at Adelaide at 78.7%, Brisbane at 54.8%, Perth at 50%, Tasmania, little old Tassie, they did 10 auctions and had an 80% success rate, Tim. It's good. It's a good result.
Yeah, and it's very broad-based, and it really does mirror what we're seeing across our broader indices as well. That this rebound really started in Sydney and Melbourne, and now it's rippling out to the smaller capital cities. And we are seeing generally values rising everywhere, even in Perth. We'll be reporting our end-of-month indices next week, and it will be showing Perth up for the first time in many months. In fact, really since early 2018 was a very brief pause in Perth's decline, but really since 2014. So I think we are seeing a turning point in that market, and the smaller capital cities also starting to respond to the very low rates and easier access to credit.
Gee, that's fantastic news about Perth, because they've really had it so tough, Tim, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. For anybody who's owned a home in Perth since really since 2006, that's where values are back to now, considering they're down about 22% from their 2014 peak. So anybody who's owned a home since 2006, there is a chance that the value of their home is worth less than what they paid for it. So no doubt those homeowners would be looking for a turn in the market in what is a very affordable capital city.
We're going to take you to our top sale out of Sydney in just a moment. CoreLogic telling us over $11 million for a property in Sydney. We'll take you to that in just a moment. Before we do, Tim, take us through the sub-regions in Sydney and what are the standouts there for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So across the 15 sub-regions of Sydney, we saw the highest clearance rates coming in at 91%, and that was shared across the Inner West, across Sutherland, and also across the North Sydney market in Hornsby. So all three of those sub-region or SA4 sub-regions returning a clearance rate up in the 90% market, 91%. You can see that the Northern Beaches was just below that at 90%. And then it sort of drifts down that the weakest performing auction market, which is par for the course, there's generally lower number of auctions, was out of the Outer West and the Blue Mountains, much more, skewed towards private treaty. In that particular area, also a relatively low clearance rate in the outer southwest and the Hills District, which was at 66%, and the outer southwest at 60%.
Well, let's have a look at that top sale out of Sydney for you now. Well, they don't come much better than this, and the price tag of $11 million plus, I guess, reflects that. Ivan Resnikov from Century 21 successfully sold this landmark property in one of Sydney's most sought-after waterfront locations. The views across the harbour, as you can see, are absolutely breathtaking. With unhindered main harbour, Opera House and those beautiful city views. Currently 2 4-bedroom homes, solidly built, renovated in 1989 and probably just in need of a little bit of updating. $11.2 million for this stunner, and that was the biggest sale in the country this weekend. Yeah, what a spectacular home. I love those views, Tim, right across that harbour to the Opera House in the city. They're quite spectacular, aren't they?
I reckon the best thing about that house was the McCallum Pool right across the road. I don't know if you noticed that, but yeah, one of Sydney's saltwater, naturally natural filling pools.
Yeah, very good. Well spotted. I didn't pick up on that, Tim. Good on you. Let's take you to Melbourne now, and Tim, maybe you can take us through the Melbourne sub-regions, please.
So overall, we saw Melbourne come up with a 78% auction clearance rate, and the volume there was the biggest it's been since late 2017. But the real standouts in Melbourne have seen a clearance rate of 82%. So that was in Melbourne's west and the outer east, both at 82%. The northwest saw a clearance rate of 81%, and Melbourne's inner at 80%. But generally speaking, every sub-region is seeing clearance rates around the mid 70% or higher. The only difference there would be Mornington Peninsula, and generally that has shown a weaker auction clearance rate throughout time. Once again, these are more private treaty markets than auction markets, with a clearance rate of 66% across the Mornington Peninsula.
Okay, well, let's have a look at our top sale out of Melbourne now. It comes out of Hawthorn East. Melbourne's top sale is a 5-bedder in Hawthorn that sold under the hammer on Saturday for just a touch over $4.5 million. Marketed by Richard and Chloe from Jealous Craig, this luxurious double-storey residence is a state-of-the-art family sanctuary in a premier private school location. A classic contemporary home, from the extensive 5-bedroom and study interior to meticulously landscaped gardens, beautiful north rear entertainment oasis, and a vast 20 squares of basement garage. The inside of the home is set over 3 levels with 3-metre ceilings. The American Oak executive study opens to a private courtyard, while there's a huge billiard room and spacious family living dining areas with French doors to barbecue terrace and self-cleaning heated pool. Yeah, another great property selling under the hammer. CoreLogic telling us that one's selling in Hawthorn East on Saturday. Let's go to Cate Bakos now. Kate's going to, during the summer series, give us an insight into how auctions work. Here's Cate Bakos. Hello and welcome to this series where my featured guest is going to be Cate Bakos. Cate, of course, is no stranger to our audience. She is a buyer's agent based in Melbourne. Melbourne, of course, you'd have to say is one of the most prolific property auction markets in Australia, if not the world. Even though auctions might be well accepted in both Melbourne and Sydney, we have to acknowledge the fact that many people will probably only ever be a bidder at an auction maybe once or twice in their whole life. That's why we're creating this series, where we're going to take you behind the scenes, almost behind the auctioneer, to get a better understanding of how you can prepare yourself for auction, how you can get along to an auction, and how you can bid successfully. This week, Cate is going to help us work out the price range that you need to be realistically preparing yourself to bid in when you go to an auction. Cate, welcome to the show and thanks for your time.
It's a total pleasure. I love coming on the show.
Good on you. Okay, let's talk about price, because this is probably one of the big things that many people don't prepare themselves well enough for, and probably end up paying a little bit more than they wanted to, and creating that premium price that we so often hear about at auctions. How do we guard against that, Cate?
Well, we have to look into the science of pricing. So conduct some recent comparable analysis. And the way that we do this is we look at some past sales that are very similar to this property. So in other words, similar land size, same suburb, similar dwelling type, similar number of bedrooms. When you can source the properties that have recently sold that are similar, you'll get a very good feel for where this one might sit in amongst those sales data. And I say to people when they're sorting out what sort of property they're going for and they're starting on their journey, go out and do some reconnaissance and see some auctions. So watch the bidders, familiarise yourself with the way that some of the auctioneers call an auction, and you might even spot some bidders that become quite familiar because obviously there's underbidders and they follow similar properties. Not only will this give the buyer a little bit more intel, but they'll also get a sense of familiarity with a process that usually terrifies people.
Yeah, some great advice there. Can we talk about price ranges? Because we're seeing more and more agents using price ranging. The question I've got for you is, how realistic is that range, and how much notice should we take of it, Kate?
I'm opening Pandora's box here, but we have varying legislation around our states with how an auction property is presented to the public and what sort of pricing is mentioned. And sometimes the guide price is not an actual indication of what the property is likely to sell for. Sometimes there's bait pricing, which is a method that some agents can use to pull in the buyers with an expectation that the property will sell for less than what it's worth. And then they get caught up in the hype and they decide to stretch accordingly. So there's lots of difficult processes for buyers to navigate around, but in short, if they can have a look at the agent's comparable sales, and if the agent isn't suggesting there are comparable sales, buyers can actually just ask them, what are some of the sales that you think are indicative of where this one could wind up? And then they can have a simple look on a search engine themselves or drive past and decide for themselves whether it's comparable or inferior or superior. And it sounds like a very difficult way to go about determining price, but this is in fact how agents, buyers agents and valuers go about determining value often.
Yeah, because one of the difficulties for every buyer and every seller for that case is the fact that every buyer wants to pay less than what it's worth and every seller wants more than what it's worth. Even though they both might not individually realise they're doing that, it's actually what happens. So it sort of, it leads me therefore to wonder, Kate, and this is a question without notice, if a buyer going to an auction should actually prepare themselves for the price I'd really love to buy it at, the price that I am prepared to pay, and the price that I'm not prepared to pay.
Absolutely. Those three prices are actually how we conduct our price setting with our clients, and we call it the XYZ pricing structure. Obviously, X is where we'd love it to land, and it's got to be a realistic expectation of what the property could sell for in the absence of competition. Y is where we think the property price is likely to wind up based on the competition, and Z is that figure that at $1 more, they're happy to walk away. They will be disappointed and they will feel like grieving, but they won't feel regret because they've stretched themselves to a fair stretch and they've let it go to someone else who's prepared to pay a premium.
Yeah, because that XYZ pricing, and I love the way you describe that, that's a really good indicator too about where the market is. I mean, if we're seeing a lot of properties sell at the X price, then we know that it's definitely a buyer's market, and so on it goes. So where are we right now? Let's say in the Melbourne market. Are we at the X, Y or Z range?
Well, it's interesting. A month or two ago, I would have said we're at the Z range because stock was very tight and sentiment was very strong. We had such a turnaround after our federal election. We've had some rate cuts and we've got some energy out there. We're also seeing investors coming back onto the market. So I would have argued that 2 months ago, buyers had to be prepared to stretch and records were being set every weekend. With Christmas approaching though, and with an influx of auction activity in a very late spring, we're actually finding that we're getting a little bit of equilibrium sorting itself out, and we're seeing a few more pass-ins, and we're not seeing auctions flying like they were in the past months because we've got a little bit more of a balance. It's not by any means a buyer's market, and our auction clearance rates are still high, but if we segment them and we ask some careful questions, we'll see that some of those sales results are actually negotiations after a pass-in.
I noticed in your notes too, and you've mentioned it already, that part of the homework that every buyer should do is they should go to some other auctions. And I suppose the best way to do that is to become familiar with the auctioneer who will be calling the auction of the property you're particularly interested in, but also to follow the agent. And you're going to be able to see how well they prepare their seller for auction, what they do, what the language is like. So all of that homework can really come back to pay big dividends, can't it?
It absolutely can. We get some of the best intel that we can possibly source from the listing agent just by asking them questions that might be closed, where we get a direct yes or a no or a number, or by asking them open questions about the nature of the campaign and what sorts of terms the vendors could be excited by.
Wonderful stuff, Kate. We're going to come back next week. I'm going to build a little bit on what we've talked about now, and that is the sorts of questions or the information you can get from the agent. What's acceptable to ask? They're the questions Kate will answer for us next time when we get together in this special summer series of our auction update. And of course, coming to you with the compliments of CoreLogic. We thank them as we take a bit of a break over this Christmas New Year period from the auctions, and we're giving you this behind the scenes look with Cate Bakos. Kate, thank you for your time, and we'll look forward to talking to you next week.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Kate, and Kate will join us right through the summer series as well. I'm going to take a quick break now, come back, and then I'll give you a video tour through the top sales in the ACT and also in Brisbane. Back in just a moment.
In today's market, great ideas alone simply aren't enough, but innovative execution can hand you a real competitive advantage. Nightlight is a cutting-edge illuminated signboard by Printforce that offers round-the-clock visibility and features that maximise advertising space, improving your exposure. Buyers can now see the full picture, day or night, with Nightlight's edge-to-edge illuminated surface, which utilises environmentally friendly, scratch-resistant technology. Now available in 6x4 and 8x4. Nightlight is as versatile as you need to be in today's market. Let your clients know you're working day and night for them, and then prove it with Nightlight.
Welcome back to the show. Well, our top sale out of Brisbane was one that actually we featured last Friday in our property show. Let's have a look at that. 119 Nelson Street, Kalinga is an iconic landmark dating back to the early 1900s. Christine and Matt from Ray White New Farm sold this property on Saturday under the hammer for $5,150,000. The parcel of 3,383 square metres of blue chip inner city land, as well as prime frontage to Kalinga Park, this magnificent trophy home has been meticulously renovated throughout with luxurious high-end inclusions and finishes, each room showcasing the home's early colonial architectural influence. Hidden from street view, this private residence is entered via electronic manor gates and down a long landscaped circular driveway that once belonged to the adjoining historical Kedron Lodge. A stunner, this one, 119 Nelson Street, Kalinga, sold by Ray White New Farm. Okay, and our top sale out of the ACT, almost $4 million, CoreLogic telling us this one. Have a look at it. Top sale from the ACT is a charming Art Deco home in Forest. Mario San Francisco from Peter Blackshaw marketed and sold this one, positioned within one of Canberra's most exclusive inner south precincts. The impressive residence sits stately on a generous 2,474 square metre block, behind high hedging, elegant iron gates and surrounded by magnificently landscaped formal gardens. The essence of the residence itself is of modern Art Deco architecture with timeless elegance and character typically seen within the Southern Highlands. Canberra's top sale, 18 Tennyson Crescent, Forest. Sold by Mario San Francisco from Peter Blackshaw. Congratulations, Mario. Okay, so there were the top sales out of some of the cap cities around Australia. CoreLogic giving us those reports every Monday. Tim Lawless has been my guest this week. Tim, let's just do a quick wrap. The weighted average clearance rates?
Up at 78.9% preliminary this week, Kevin. So a very strong reading on what's been the biggest auction market so far this year. Looking forward, we are expecting the auction market is going to hold very strong over the rest of the year. We don't really see auctions starting to quieten down until the middle of December. But our forecast is showing that we probably will see just a subtle fall in the number of auctions to be held over the next weekend. Okay, well, that's interesting, because that was going to be my next question. What are you predicting for Friday? So we'll have a look at that on Friday when we come back, and we'll give you those numbers from CoreLogic. And then Tim will join me again next Monday. We'll have a look at the first lot of weighted average numbers from the weekend. Tim, great talking to you, my friend. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks, Kevin. Good to speak.
Look forward to talking to you on next Monday. Okay, and don't forget those summer series special segments with Cate Bakos. We'll keep rolling those out over the summer series. I'm Kevin Turner. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.